Afternoon. Call to order our council working session. And for Thursday night, we have going to do something a little different since our brother has passed. We get with Chief and Ms. Jill as we do a moment of silence for him and a roll call, coordinate with city manager. The city manager will talk more about it. So we have a roll call, the invocation, pledge of allegiance, and then we have two presentations. Presentation for our own city manager as he's getting an award for recognized by the Association of Defense Communities and selected as the 24-25 Defense Company Community Champions. Congratulations, sir. And also a proclamation as the Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame. After that concludes, we turn it over to our city manager for his report, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mayor McCaw, members of the council. You have obviously your meeting Thursday at 5. That will be preceded by a special meeting at 4. And then, of course, the meetings for Thanksgiving week will be canceled in observance of the holiday. So your next meetings will be your meeting in December, the first two meetings. So almost done for the year in terms of your council meetings. I'll update you on some projects Thursday, but tonight I want to focus on our revenue situation. Mr. Felix gave me the September numbers for sales tax, and unfortunately I have to report to you that we have fallen below our actual budget revenue projections, which are always conservatively estimated. This is the first time that has happened for quite some time. So we're not seeing any improvement in sales tax revenue, and hopefully we'll see some pickup going into the holiday season, which is usually our best season for sales tax revenue. In response to that, I've asked Budget and Finance team to start looking at our expenditures so we can get a pretty good idea of how that looks. We normally have a mid-year budget review with you in February, but I think we're to the point where I need to start looking at that now. That may require some extraordinary cost-cutting measures depending on the outcome of that analysis, and I will certainly share with you what I plan to do if we don't see the situation improve. But right now, it doesn't look very good, and it hasn't really looked good all year. We have no CCOM JPA meeting this Thursday, so the last one for next year will be in December. And then Victoria and I are working with Dan Hawes, our new water attorney, and there's a number of issues surrounding water that are currently going on, having to do with 100-year water adequacy, active management area designations, the 203-acre transfer that will have to go through the NEPA process, and of course the Fort Huachuca biological assessment that are still going on. We plan on having an executive session with you to discuss legal strategies with all those, with the new council shortly after the first of the year. So that's all I have tonight, and I'll have a little bit more on Thursday.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any questions, comments for city manager? Thank you. And we continue. We have consent agenda. Also, we have two resolutions, resignation of Keith Landry from the Transportation Commission, as well as the reappointment of Randy Wilcox and Damon Malone to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Then we go to the call of public and comments and requests from the council. And that'll be conclusion of Thursday's council meeting. And tonight, go to item Bravo. We have the fire department staffing assessment. We're going to call Chief Jones. Sir.
Thank you very much, Member Carr, members of council. It's my pleasure to introduce Steve Knight from Fitch & Associations. They are going to do our assessment today, and I would just like to thank him and his organization for coming out and doing a deep dive into our organization and seeing where we need to go in the future. So without further ado, there's Steve Knight.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. That's always the first biggest challenge. So thank you again for the opportunity to come and share with you the product of our study and working with the fire department. I'm sure I'm not preaching to the choir here, but you've got an excellent organization. But they're at a couple milestones right now in their maturity with the increased call volume and risk assessment and things that we accomplish. So I'll kind of walk that through with you. It is rather brief, so I'll be happy to stay and answer as many questions as you have, but I'll try to keep it at the 30,000-foot level to get through it. So that's not it. All right, I guess I'll use the mouse. Yeah, that's what sent me off to Neverland. So I'll do it this way. Okay, so just super high level, we're just going to cover these 5 things, a little bit about our firm, the top 7 priorities that we kind of identified throughout the report, a little bit of how we got from point A to point B in the executive summary, and then some findings and recommendations, and then I'll open it up for questions. So a little bit about our firm. We've been around for 40 years as a public safety consulting firm. We believe we're the longest running firm. I don't know that we can actually stand by that or prove that in any way, but we've had our roots way back in the 80s, primarily in EMS, and now we do full public safety with 911 and police and fire and all kinds of things like that. So the top 7 priorities, let's walk through these, and these aren't necessarily in any specific order, but there's a couple opportunities with, if you think about it, I describe it as hello to hello time. So if you think about response time for communities, it really begins when a citizen or visitor calls 911 until you arrive at the scene. So in that entire response time continuum are some different time elements, like the time it takes to answer the call at the 911 center, the time that it takes the crews to get out of the station and go to the call, and then, of course, the drive time. And then when you stretch that all out, it's the total response time. Okay. What we noticed in your system, and I'll show you the exact numbers in a moment, is that the dispatch time and the turnout time, if you were to follow best practice, has a little bit of an opportunity for some improvement in those areas. The reason we like to highlight those, and we know that there's competing demands and different challenges of how to get from point A to point B, but the reason we highlight those is if you think about the response time continuum, the most expensive part is on the response side. It's more stations, more people, more equipment, where managing how quickly you get out of the station or managing how quickly you can process a call in the 911 center generally has a greater return on investment for those kinds of solutions. And the citizen still benefits from the total response time, and it doesn't have to be overly leveraged with new fire stations and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So as we went through the risk assessment, and if you're not familiar with what a standards of cover is, it's really it's right in the name, right? It's a standard of how you measure your performance, how you align your resource allocation to the risks that are in your community. And then you're always looking for that policy balance of how much protection am I willing or able to purchase and how much risk am I willing to assume as a community. So you're always trying to balance those two. In the risk assessment process, which I'll walk you through, what we really found is it's time for an additional dedicated fire suppression unit in the system and an additional medical transport unit in the system. So it's just that the call volumes come up, and I'll be able to show you one of the challenges that you have right now is we would refer to it as a commensurate risk model. So you would want areas that have like risk to have like response. And right now, you're getting a little bit misaligned on that, where you have some areas with different configurations for the same kind of risk that was measured. So we're just trying to align those pieces, and we'll walk through that with you. Continue with your risk-based planning efforts that this study has set up, so the department will make sure that that's a living, breathing document. And ideally, the policy group would adopt whatever the standards are after this study so that future policy groups like yourselves won't have to start the conversation over of why do we need a new station, why would we need to reinvest in a new ambulance, things like that. You would already have all of those assessment triggers and measures in place and routinely measured and reported out to both the public and the policy group so that those are anchored in a commonality of purpose, if you will, as you move forward in how you measure. In addition to that, and this is really just best practice, 30,000-foot diagnosis of outcome measures and system performance measures, what we're seeing in the industry is to start, and I'll use an example of an outcome measure might be to say, the fire department in the city may decide that we want all structure fires to be controlled into the room of origin, so that doesn't spread to the house, doesn't spread to any other houses. If you have quality outcome measures and you can feel confident in those measures, then at some future state, you can start to desensitize response time as your only arbiter of quality. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that if you're meeting your outcome measures, you can have more flexibility as a policy group to say, my response time is creeped up by 30 seconds. Do I have to immediately react, or is that more of a choice of whether I want to react? So you have a little bit of a balance if you have a broader spectrum of what you can measure and bring to the table. Okay. And the last piece on that is we think the department would benefit from having a strategic plan that will complement this study and kind of map out the next 3 to 5 years on how they would want to prioritize the recommendations, what they want to work on first, how they would get from point A to point B. Fair enough?
Fair.
Okay. So the product of the study really was in 4 phases. The first phase, because we wanted to be very data-driven, was a quantitative data analysis. That was followed up by a comprehensive GIS analysis that looked at all your station locations and configurations. And then the risk assessment was that piece where I talked about how we measured the risk in the community and put that together so that you could have a risk-based approach to your deployment. And then the last piece brings it all together with the report that was shared with you, which is a standard of cover and executive summary style. And then all of those previous 3 phases are anchored as technical resources for the fire department to lean on as they move forward and measure. So let's talk about improving response time. If you look at the columns with the headers that say dispatch time, turnout time, travel time, so let's just focus on one at a time. The dispatch time is from the time that a citizen or visitor calls 911 until they can process a call and alert the fire department that there's a call that they need to respond to. That was, if we just focus on the system within here without any of the contracted areas, it was right around 3 minutes, just under 3 minutes, 2.9 minutes to dispatch that. If you look at the bottom left, a best practice that we would recommend that we see in the industry, especially when you're doing call triage for the medical, somewhere around 2 minutes is a really best practice. If you followed this standard, it would really be closer to 1 minute, but that's really unrealistic in today's world, so they probably need to update that benchmark standard. But so there's an opportunity of maybe improving that total response time continuum by, say, 30 seconds or a minute in the dispatch interval if you can kind of discern what opportunities there are for greater efficiencies and move that pendulum a little bit. The turnout time is measured from the time that the crews are alerted that there's a call until they get out of the station and are actually driving en route to the call. And as measured, and these are all at the 90th percentile, I'll come back to that in just a moment. But you're at 2.2 minutes overall for the turnout time, and the recommendation for best practice is about 1 minute for EMS-related calls and 1.5 minutes for structure fires, technical rescue, all those kinds of things where you may have to don protective gear and things like that before you leave the station. So again, in the scheme of things nationally, neither dispatch nor turnout is an aberrant finding for what we're seeing, but there still is an opportunity for you to improve and have some incremental adjustment. Then the next piece is the travel time, and we're going to focus on that a fair amount because it really comes down to some of the recommendations that looks at how quickly you can get from point A to point B with your road impedance and your road network and the infrastructure that you have in place. Right now, overall, you're at about 9.3 minutes as a travel time to go to the call. And the recommendation for urban is 4 minutes. That's not our recommendation. That's a national standard. I will say that it's extremely difficult to get to 4 minutes. Most communities cannot. So you do have an opportunity from a policy perspective to kind of choose where you want to be, and I'm going to draw you back in on that conversation here in a couple slides. So overall, you have an opportunity to improve the total response time by, say, a minute, minute and a half overall, if you can hit best practice in dispatch and turnout. So we evaluated the fire station locations. So when we looked at your 4 stations and the GIS analysis, if you think about it from a supply and demand equation, the stations are your supply side of the equation, right? I have X number of stations on this road network and these speed limits, and I can get from point A to point B in X amount of time. What we found in the GIS is predicated, since we're looking at it through that supply lens, it's predicated that there's a unit available in that station and actually can leave the station and respond to the call. So if you had units available at all the stations, the investment that you've already made as a city for the 4 stations should put you at a 6-minute travel time. And again, if you remember from the previous slide, you're at 9.3 minutes. And when we looked at that, we'll get into that a little deeper. When we looked at that, it really comes down to your resource allocation in those 4 stations isn't sufficient to meet the demand side. So the supply is your stations and your road network, and those resources need to be available in order to respond. The demand side is how many calls an hour am I running, and how often am I already on a call when another call comes in, and we'll kind of walk through that. So every time, let's just pick a station, say 203, if that unit is out and another call comes in that zone, then you're going to have to run 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes longer from the next closest station in order to come in and respond. Okay? So with that configuration, what we're really going to try to do is attune the resource allocation to your existing stations. And to put it bluntly, this solution, mitigation that I'm offering here in the study is you don't need more stations, you need more depth in the stations that you do have. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, one of the things that we were asked to look at is your multi-purpose unit at Station 203. And if you're not familiar, it's a fire engine that also can transport patients. That's a very unique, innovative strategy, but it's, in our assessment, it's outlived its usefulness from the standpoint that the call volume is too high. So in our assessment, mathematically, you start to run into a higher and higher probability of collision. And what I mean is you're on a fire-related call and you need that resource for an EMS call, or it's an EMS call, you need it for a fire-related call, those kinds of things, because you're double booked. So in our assessment, we suggest that anytime you're running more than 1,500 calls a year and you have a simultaneity value or a call concurrency value more than 15% of the time, those two together put you at risk of being out of pocket too often. So what we're recommending with that specific unit is to now unpack that to where you would have a dedicated EMS unit at that station as well as a dedicated fire unit. So how we got there, for example, if you look at the upper left in the yellow, less than 70%, it's at 69%. 69% of the time when a call came in for that station was a unit assigned to that station actually available and able to take the call. The Commission on Fire Accreditation International sets a standard where they look at anything that's less than 70% as not credible. So it just kind of solidifies our analysis already that the availability is impacting that unit's efficacy. So if you look at the blue one, we're looking at call concurrency. What that's saying is 20.5% of the time when a call occurs, a second or third call will occur at the same time. So again, you're at a pinch point to say how often is when I go on a call, do I not have any available resources left in that zone in order to respond in that 6 minutes we're talking about? So again, it just reinforces separating those two units, and having a dedicated fire suppression unit and a dedicated EMS unit would help with that considerably. And then the bottom is just the overall call volume, where they had 2,512 calls in 2023, and our threshold for duality of units is at 1,500. Any questions on that?
No, sir.
Okay. So coming back to the resource allocation, let me walk through how to interpret these figures. So if you can, the bottom one's probably easier for you, at least see it, but all of those green and yellow columns are all of the calls per hour for each day of the week. So on the far left, it starts at Sunday. Each one of those humps is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way through Saturday. All of the blue part is your geographic requirement in order to meet the response time. And I built these out at 6 minutes because that's what your station configuration could accomplish. So the red line is what your effective staffing is for the resources. So let's go back up to the fire suppression on the top now that we can kind of decipher the figure a little bit. With 4 stations, you can see that blue area, the combined demand for fire-related activity and the geographic component for the 4 stations exceeds your 3 fire suppression unit resource allocation. So that'll be something on the next slide we'll talk about, but that's why your response time is at 9.3 minutes and not at 6 minutes that the stations would be able to accomplish. Same thing on the EMS on the bottom at 3 effective dedicated units. And we trimmed, if you notice on the top graph, it has all 4 stations because each station needs a fire suppression unit according to the risk. Because you have that base layer of investment on the fire suppression side, you can approach EMS with a little more efficiency to where the EMS doesn't have to have all the stations occupied at all times in order to be effective. When all the units are available, every station would have a medic unit, but as the calls go throughout the day, they have a little more flexibility because you have that base layer on the fire suppression side for first response when needed. So you can see on the bottom slide, at 3 dedicated resources, each one of those peaks throughout the peak period of the day, you're going to be under-resourced as you have those calls occurring in simultaneous events. So I'll show you on the next one the remedy for that. So this is what we recommend. If you focus the same strategy on the fire suppression side would be that 4th unit. As you can tell, it's very lean. We're not being overly egregious on a robust solution. That will still be challenged throughout the peak of the day, but because the majority of your calls are EMS, having an EMS allocation is not only a better cost avoidance strategy, but it really meets the needs of the community. And if you were going to leverage being a little too lean on one side or the other, I think the better investment and return on investment is on the EMS side. So if you go to the bottom, that's what that one is, would be a 4th dedicated unit on that. And you can really see the white space above the demand for services and what your staffing is shows that you have a little bit more capacity to handle surges and things like that in the equation. Does that make sense? Any
Yes, sir.
questions?
Sir, on your fire suppression, you said this will require 4 staff resources per day. Is that 4 staff on the apparatus itself?
No, I'm sorry. 4 fire engines.
Oh, 4 fire engines.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Now, whether that's a ladder truck or not, that's a whole other question, but yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Got
4
it.
fire suppression resources.
See.
Yes, sir.
All right.
So now putting that all together, if you look at the map, what we measured on that was that one of your stations, the station 201, I guess that is that the right one? I can't even see that. The red block is your highest risk station, and all the others were moderate risk stations. So this is what I was alluding to earlier about having a commensurate risk, so that all of the zones that have moderate risk have the same kind of resource allocation and mitigation strategy. So like risk gets like response. And I think that's really what we're trying to accomplish is you're at that growth period with the call volume in your community. And then the red area is the higher risk station, and that, eventually would probably get additional resources, but that's not the priority at this point.
Okay.
Okay?
I have a question.
Yeah, yes.
So is that, red area, is,
Station 1.
that's Station 1? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have glasses, but apparently they're not going to.
Sorry.
No, thank you. So again, this is super high level. These are some examples of outcome measures. We put this in there just to balance out the approach. We don't want this to be over prescriptive. If the department likes this kind of strategy and wants to go down that avenue, then they can develop their own. And most communities aren't collecting the data to support this, so they would have to identify what kinds of things they want to measure in the future and then start designing the mechanism to garner and gather that kind of data so they can use it in the future. And then the last one is looking at a system of measures. Again, this would be the ongoing reporting where the department would measure all these to stay attuned to what's changing in the system, make sure that all of the adopted standards are meeting the expectations of performance, and then report that out quarterly or annually, whatever the policy desire is, so that that can be, a readily available and become part of your regular nomenclature about the fire department and the performance. And the last piece is just imagining a strategic plan to help guide the department over the future. It's kind of a best practice, and they could do that internally or look to others to help them or however they wanted to accomplish that.
They're from the Army.
And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
I have a question here. First of all, I just want to thank you for being here and for going over this and breaking it down with us. I think it's very, very helpful, and it's really great to be able to see all the data like this spread out and to have this for future reference as well. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So my question is on slide 11, where you have the graph there. Is there anything being done to address that red area there? I mean, realizing that it is high risk, is there any way to work with anybody else? Like, I don't know what our relationship is with Fry Fire, if there's any way to work with them possibly, or is more units the only answer to address that area?
No, it's not the only answer to address that. I'll let the chief weigh in on what avenues he wants to adopt and move forward with. But at this time, even though it's a higher risk, it really would come down to a policy preference on purchasing additional protection so that, for example, that area might have additional resources to handle additional high risk. We felt that the priority was getting the totality of the system settled, and then you can address that later. But to your point, you're spot on, where community risk reduction activities, looking at what kinds of risks are in that area that are specific that maybe you could target through non-response related preventative efforts might be able to help mitigate that kind of risk. The chief was showing me all the AEDs that they manage throughout the city. That's a great example. Response time is not the only thing that helps with sudden cardiac arrest. Trained people in the community that can do CPR, access to AEDs, plenty of software and apps now that can alert people that are trained where the AEDs are and where there's an incident. So to your point, yeah, there's a lot of other things that you can explore as well before you have to invest immediately.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any more questions?
Hey, it's Councilman Rodriguez. Can you hear me?
Hey, what's going on, sir?
How you doing? Great brief. Thank you for the information. It's very, very informative. I think it points out the obvious issues, obviously where we need a medic and where we need a fire engine for our city. With those stats where it said, obviously there's a lot of times where they're on a call, they get called somewhere else. I know that happens a lot. Is any of that data able to look at and see, like, how many times they've been on a snake call, for instance, which is low priority, and something else pops and they have to go somewhere else? How many times that happened? So I know we talked about this before about maybe shifting that burden off of our firefighters and those $1 million trucks back to animal control, to something that's a little bit more easier to manage for them. That way they can go do that. They don't have to get pulled off a call. Is that showed anywhere?
We did not pull that out specifically by the call severity. We certainly have that in the data, but we looked at the aggregate to say how often did any call occur when a second call occurred, to your point. But one thing I will at least plant the seed with you on that is, and it's a great question, but once you have the EMS resource allocation appropriate, then the chief will have more opportunity to decide which severity of call might get a fire engine, which severity of call needs a transport unit, and look at other solutions once you've solved your EMS overlay of having a resource in each one of those stations. So right now, you're kind of under-resourced and challenged on the response side. So the chief will have a lot more flexibility when he has a little bit greater depth and can then start discerning which type of resource is best for which type of risk.
Thank you. One last thing. I know we mentioned, obviously, where you need an engine, obviously, Station 4, I know looking forward, that was supposed to happen in the future, but the way it's currently set up, if I'm not mistaken, it cannot support a heavy apparatus vehicle. Is that because of construction, I believe? So that would be something else we'd have to look at as well, correct?
Yeah, member call, Councilman Rodriguez. Yes, that is something we have to look. The infrastructure at Station 4 cannot really, the station is big enough, but some of the infrastructure would need to be looked at in the future in order to allow for an engine to be there.
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? Sir, I really appreciate your assessment. Thank you for coming down. Welcome to Sierra Vista.
Thank you very much.
Notice we have a host of first responders in the audience. Anyone would like to comment? Chief, Assistant Chief?
Question on the 911 call processing. Did that take into account the use of ProQA at CCOM with the 911 Center for different priority calls? A lower priority 911 call takes longer because it's not as priority,
Yes.
the type of level.
Yeah. Yeah, in the data report, great question. In the data report, it breaks it out by the determinant Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo. And there is some discernment there in the right direction, where an alpha takes a lot longer than an echo call. But overall, no, it's still a little long. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good question, Chief. Very good question. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
You have something else, Mark?
Oh, just, again, this is great data. I'm glad it got put together. It seems like, I kind of asked this, I asked this at our last meeting, when it comes to where the delta been between our call volume between last year and this year. Obviously, this one also shows the same thing. Like, we're doing way more calls a year with, it seems like, less people than last year. And that's the other thing I asked last time was, would it show in the data how many firefighters we had last year or the years before versus what we have now? And the delta between that and the call volume that seems to be going up and up and up. Is that something we can pull from the data later?
Chief, at our call volume right now, how's it looking for the year?
Member call, members of council, our call volume is going up. We're probably going to exceed 10,000 calls this year. And I am looking at call saturation and the time it takes for units being busy and on other calls.
Yes, sir.
Per Councilman Rodriguez's request last time.
And is that Fry Fire still on the West End?
I didn't hear what
Fry
you said.
Fire still on the West End?
Member call, members of council, yes. Fry Fire does have a station on 2nd Street, which is housed on 2nd Street. They have a medic unit and a fire engine there. It's usually staffed with 2 or 3 people, so.
Okay. Any other questions there, Councilman Rodriguez?
No, that is it. Thank you very much.
Appreciate
I
it.
apologize for couldn't be here in person.
Oh, no problem. We understand you was traveling. Any questions on the dais? No comments, questions? Thank you, sir, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you to our first responders, fire department, for your support. Looking forward to more great things coming out of FB. Sierra Vista Fire Department.
Yes.
There you go. And we'll go to our next item, Item Charlie, Municipal Court Assessment. And we have someone online for that as well. Hearing none.
Hello, this is
Oh,
Joe. Can you?
there you go.
So let me just share my screen. But thank you all for your time today, and I apologize for not being able to be there in person. One sec. Okay, can you see
Yes, sir.
the application?
Yes, sir. We're connected.
Okay, good. So in the presentation, so I'll give some background on who we are as a company, the purpose of our study, which is the Sierra Vista Court Feasibility Study, our methodology, some key findings and recommendations. So I represent Rounds Consulting Group. We specialize in economic impact analysis, feasibility studies, and financial forecasting for public and private clients throughout Arizona. We have experience working with municipalities to assess economic development opportunities, providing data-driven insights. And so I'm Luis Cordova, and I'm Vice President of Rounds Consulting Group. I'm a Southern Arizona native. I was raised in Douglas, so go Bulldogs. I have over 10 years practicing economics in Arizona, analyzing the impact of certain policy changes, conducting various market studies, calculating return on investment, and providing financial forecasting services for cities and counties throughout the state. Ethan Burke is one of our economic analysts who he can't be here today, but he assisted with the research and putting the study together. So as you know, Sierra Vista currently uses the Cochise County Justice of the Peace Precinct 5 under our co-location model for their municipal court. And in this model, the city pays an annual co-location fee based on its proportional share of municipal court costs. So the purpose of our study was to assess the feasibility and financial implications of establishing a standalone municipal court. So we employed a multifaceted approach to conducting our study, which included, so it started with document review, which included collecting and analyzing relevant data, historical court studies, operational costs, comparable municipal court structures. And then we benchmarked this information against cities like Packagee Junction, Bullhead City, Oro Valley, and Casa Grande, which have similar sized populations, demographics, and economic traits as Sierra Vista. And then we conducted a needs assessment, which evaluated Sierra Vista's current and future court requirements based on population growth, caseload trends, and facility needs. Then we conducted a revenue and expenditure analysis. So we analyzed the potential revenues from court fines and fees and projected operating costs for a standalone municipal court using data from Sierra Vista, Cochise County, and comparable cities. And then finally, we compiled all this information and compared the cost and the benefits of a standalone court versus the existing co-location model. So just some of the high-level key findings. In terms of the court need, based on the city's current and projected population growth, caseloads, and staffing needs, a minimum of 9 full-time positions are required, and that includes a judge, court clerks, bailiffs, admin staff. So with that, it was determined that a minimum of 4,900 square feet new courthouse would be required for a standalone court. And then, so based on the minimum square footage, our sub-consultant estimated that the cost to build this new courthouse would be between 2.3 and 2.9 million. And so now looking at the financial feasibility, currently under the co-location court model, the annual fees are about 280,000 annually. So if the city were to establish a court, that would be the savings. In terms of revenues, Service generates about 165,000 in annual court-related revenues. And again, that's fees and fines. One thing we do want to point out that it is significantly lower than the comparable cities that we were looking at.
Excuse me,
and
Mr. Cordova. We have a different number on your slide. You said, unless I'm reading the wrong slide, you said 165, and you put in here 174.7.
Oh yeah, so
Not that that's a huge-
the actual number was 174,700. I was just rounding.
Okay, thank you.
And then, so in terms of operational cost for a standalone court, which included, the staffing cost, maintenance, and operations, that would be about 1.4 million annually, which is, significantly higher than the co-location structure cost of 280,700 annually. And so this table summarizes those key numbers. The construction cost in this case right here, we use that midpoint between the two numbers I gave you before. We're using about 2.6 million in construction expenditures. Now going on ongoing, the $1.4 million cost that I described before. So that, sorry, was there a question?
Oh, no.
So it includes employee salaries and benefits, the prosecution and the defense costs, and operations and maintenance. So total is 1.4 million. And then the annual operating revenues, which includes fines and fees. And it also includes the recurring tax revenues that would be produced because you'll have a standalone court operating within the city versus outside of the city. So that's what that 4,700 represents. So the net annual deficit is about $1.2 million a year versus the current co-location expenditures, which are only 700,000 a year. So really in conclusion, the analysis demonstrates that continuing with the co-location model is significantly more cost-effective and financially sustainable than establishing a standalone municipal court. The co-location model costs about $280 annually, whereas the standalone annual deficit would be about 1.2 million, so it's over $1 million more annually to have a standalone. So our recommendation is that the City of Service maintain the current co-location model with Cochise County to optimize resources and avoid any increased financial burdens.
That's a no-brainer. That was easy.
And
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Well, that went exactly how I
We
think
thought.
most of us thought it would. Thank you for your presentation. Oh, I can see you now. Okay. And it's unfortunate. Councilmember Johnson, he recently passed away, and he's the one that really wanted this. I wish I knew what questions he would have asked you right now, but he was smarter than me. So I will say that I wanted to ask you is, did you include, we have a contract outside of this court agreement with our JP5 judge, who's also our magistrate. Is that included in your, because it didn't really break down what the relevant data and court studies and operational costs that you used. It didn't say exactly what that was.
So I believe it does. I have to check. And one thing I will say, so our study will be done towards the end of the month. So you'll have a copy of that which will have a lot more detail. But I have to get back to you on that specific question. I know that we did look into that, but I think because it was going to be standalone, we would still need to incur the cost of a new judge. But I have to check on that for you.
Okay. And then for the 9 full-time positions, is that, I don't know, how many people are at JP5 now? This might not be a question for you. Is that how many people are at JP5 now?
I couldn't say.
I feel like it's not that many, right? Okay. All right.
I could answer that question.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we work with them a lot. Mayor McCaw, Mayor Pro Tem Humphrey, working at JP5 all the time and seeing the staff they have more than 9. I can tell you, because they handle the entire region, the whole Justice Precinct 5. But that number seems to be adequate, and I think on par with probably the workload of Sierra Vista.
Great. Thank you. I think that's all I have.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the dais? Thank you, sir, Mr. Cordova. Appreciate your study. Appreciate your comments. Thank you for all that you have done. Sir, you have any questions?
I was just going to say, with regards to the judge, Mayor McCaw, members of the council, I believe it's 62.5 is the current side agreement with Judge Kerfman to run. So it's hard to say whether the city would be able to hire somebody for less than that. And of course, his contract renews for another 2 years at 62.5. So clearly, in any event, I think a lot of the discussion around the court and all that really kind of centers around, well, what kind of fine revenue are you getting? And I don't think anybody really realizes that we don't really get a lot of fine revenue, and it's been a declining revenue source for a number of years. So I think that puts that question to rest here with the study, and clearly we're much better off maintaining our current agreement with Cochise County.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just like to say, knowing Mr. Johnson to be a fiscal conservative, I know that then he would not see the value in this and doing that, doing our own court and to stay where we are.
Right.
Excellent point.
And honestly, you can't put a price. I like the separation that since we don't get the revenue, no one can accuse any of our officers for writing tickets just to boost our revenue.
Correct.
It's separate from what. Right. I like that.
Yes.
It's not going to the Christmas ball.
Right.
Oh, Mark said something.
Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, thank you. No, it was the same thing. I think if Greg was there, I think he would wanted to make sure that the judges, contract number put in there. You guys brought that up, but I also think it's important to reiterate this again. It's because we do hear this often, how much, our officers are just trying to write tickets, and we heard about this just to raise whatever. But as you can clearly see, again, it does not come to the city of Sierra Vista. It's part of this agreement that we have with our current setup with the county. So any revenue that, how small it may be, it does not even come to us. That's all I wanted to clarify.
If there's any, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. There's nothing else from the dais. We'll go to item number Delta. Reports on recent trips, meetings, and future meetings.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
So the Transportation Commission, they met on the 6th. The day before, on the 5th, there was the Municipal Airport Master Plan meeting number 3. So the Planning Advisory Committee kind of came together and had some discussions and things. And then later on that day, there was a public information workshop where members of the public could come and ask questions and kind of see what was going on. So that was good, great to have that. So since the next meeting, since December's a holiday and different schedules and whatnot, the next Transportation Commission meeting will be meeting the 8th of January. It'll be 3:30 up here in the council conference room. So anybody is welcome to attend to share thoughts or kind of see what's going on with that.
Oh,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
I ask, is there going to be, I had someone ask me if there was going to be any more opportunities for the airport master plan.
There, yeah.
Oh, look how excited she is.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Humphrey, yes, there will be one more set of public meetings that has not been scheduled yet, but I would be anticipating in the March timeframe. There is
Okay.
also a project website, which I can get to you, and that is active at all times and has all the information that was presented at the public meeting.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
So I went to the,
Environmental Stewardship.
thank you, the
Commission.
Environmental Stewardship Commission for Greg. And that commission is still asking the public for input on the recycling. So you can go to our website till December 15th to provide your input on that. So they've had over 300 people so far, so the more the better. So that's really important for that. Our tourism commission met, and we're still just hitting those our strategies there. Short term, long, and they're just going forward with those. But as far as our, like what they said, we like to call it our hook for Sierra Vista.
Yes,
We're looking to the Arts and Humanity Commission to help us, bring those two commissions together to hopefully move that a little bit forward before they would come back and report to you guys. So.
The others.
Parks and Rec meets on the 12th at 5:30 p.m. at Askerin Community Center. Y'all want to come out and partake?
Marta forgot something.
Marta.
I'm sorry. The Arts and Humanity Commission meets tomorrow at 4:30 at the OYCC. Sorry.
No problem. And we meet planning and zoning 11/19. Yep, next week. So I think that's it for future meetings, and we'll go to future discussion items. Ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor McCaw. I'm tracking 3 things right now for December. We're still working on a Plan for Prosperity update and talking to the Economic Development Commission about the timing on that. We had to move your Good Neighbor Alliance presentation to December. We're still waiting for information from them. And then we're ready to present the final concept for Roadrunner Park.
You just reminded. Can I?
Go ahead.
I meant to ask this question earlier. Since the general plan, it looks like, I know there's a lot of votes left, but I don't know. So let's say it stays as is and it fails. It doesn't. What do we have to tweak it? We didn't get feedback, right, on why it failed. So what do we do?
Well, Mayor McCaw, Mayor Pro Tem Humphrey, basically our plan reverts back to the old plan, and then obviously we'll need to update and make changes to what was presented to the voters this time, and then it will go back out to a vote in your next general election, which is 2 years from now. So, and then we'll try to get feedback as to why it would have failed and see if we can address those issues.
All right, thank you. Jeez.
Anything else? Well, we will see you on Thursday night. Yes. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, thanks for bringing that up because I understand it will revert to the old plan, but I just wanted to clarify for anybody that's listening or watching that plan was put together with comments from the community, from our citizens themselves that helped us write, and helped the staff get that plan together. So I just want to make sure that's understood that, whether it gets voted on or not. So basically, people voted against the comments that already were put in by the community. Is that correct?
Yes. You are correct. Oh, thank you, sir. All right. right, with that, we will dismiss until Thursday. Thank you so much.